The ECB is poised. Germany's constitutional court gives the ESM the nod, and Dutch voters reject anti-European parties. But is it enough? Recent data suggests not. And what risks remain for Europe's periphery and indeed for the core? Here to discuss is Moritz Kramer, EMEA Head of Sovereign Ratings at S&P. Good to see you again, Moritz. Are you less worried now than you were 6 months ago? And how long can this calm last?
Well, I think as you pointed out, this is not necessarily the solution. I think what it does, what the ECB in particular has been doing with the OMT, is providing a platform upon which a solution can be built. But the solution has to come from the European capitals. It cannot come from Frankfurt, and it cannot come from Karlsruhe. So the only thing that we have now is a better starting position. And it's now the ball is clearly in the camp of the governments in Europe, and especially on the periphery, to sustain their reform processes and to not be distracted, basically carrying on modernizing their economies, making them more resilient, but also consolidating public finances, all politically and socially quite costly and unpopular.
All right, well, let's go through some of those decision processes, starting with Madrid.
Yes.
If it does not ask for a bailout in the next 6 months, how does that affect its rating?
Well, the outlook is negative on the BBB plus rating on Spain. We have been saying that if Spain asks for a full bailout package, this would not in itself be a credit negative. It would be merely a recognition that its funding is vulnerable, which I think has been visible for everyone observing the markets over the last few months. If they don't ask for a program in the next 6 months, it depends on why they wouldn't. Maybe they can get through without and convince the markets by their own actions that they're on the mend. And in this case, I don't think it would be a negative. It all depends on the circumstances under which it happens, or in your example, does not happen.
Is junk still a possibility in Spain, as far as you're concerned?
Well, we're 3 notches away from non-investment grade, as we call it. The outlook is negative, but as we have signaled, I think from what we can observe right now, we would find it unlikely that the rating would go down to non-investment grade in the near future. Obviously, the future is uncertain, and the challenges are huge and long-lasting and politically very, very difficult to overcome. But right now, I think especially with what we've seen coming from the ECB, the preconditions for success are somewhat higher than they may have been a month ago.
I'd be interested to hear your reaction to comments made by Austria's finance minister on Greece at the weekend, saying they could get a few more weeks, but with no more cash. And she talked about a cost-neutral extension. Is that feasible?
Well, I'm not quite sure what is meant by a cost-neutral extension, because if you give the Greek government more time to adjust its budget deficit, it means that more financing needs will clock up in the interim. So someone has to finance it. So it's not cost-neutral. It might be cost-neutral or funding neutral for the European partners, but then someone else needs to step up and close this gap. So right now, I think I don't have enough information what was the intention of that statement. Clearly, there is the willingness of giving Greece more time that I sense. At the same time, there's an unwillingness to put more money on the line. So how to square this circle, again, is a task for policymakers to decide. It's not obvious to me.
Of the core, which country, given the context now, the slightly better context, but which country are you most concerned about when we look at Germany and we look at France, for example?
Well, we have a negative outlook on France, and we have lowered the rating on France in January this year already. Whereas Germany is a AAA with a stable outlook. So I think this sort of gives you a first answer to your question. I think in France, what we're particularly looking at in the coming weeks is the maiden budget of the new government. We have a new government which has clearly stated it wants to change the tack of policymaking. Now, the budget for 2013 is the first concrete and great step in any direction. We have to see what that direction is, and we have to see whether this coincides with our expectation of ongoing sort of adjustment of public finances in France or not.
Do you believe they can hit the 3% deficit targets that they've set for next year? And if they do not, what does that mean for the rating?
Well, the 3% is not a target that has any particular meaning in ratings terms. It's something that has taken on a life of its own due to the Maastricht Treaty and the Stability and Growth Pact. 3% for us is not materially different from 3.2 or 2.8. So for us, it's more the direction of travel that matters, and the credibility of the medium-term framework, rather than whether they hit 1 year or the other 3% or not. It's really about the longer-term trends. And here I think we are investigating whether we see clear measures that would bring them back on a sustainable path, and over the medium to longer term, closer to balanced budgets.
Moritz, many thanks for talking with us today. Moritz Kramer from Standard & Poor's. That's it from me. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.